this evening I have the pleasure of hosting Her Excellency Dr. AISHA Abdullahi, who is the Commissioner for Political Affairs. Thank you very much for making time to be with us.
Thank you, Fiona.
Now the country, and of course when we look into Africa, the cost of protecting and securing is on the budget for the African Union, it's very high because of course of political tensions and conflicts. What do you think should be done to ease some of these conflicts that the region is currently facing?
Well, thank you very much. Let me begin by saying that in 2013, when we had our 50-year anniversary celebration, our leaders pondered over this issue of conflicts on the continent and the need to address them. And it was clear that if we don't really do something strong, we don't make concerted efforts to address these conflicts, our dream, our Agenda 2063, which we had set out as our vision for the next 50 years, and now currently the Agenda 2030, the Agenda for Development, the SDGs, would continue to remain an illusion for the African continent if we don't silence the guns. And so part of the solemn declaration of our leaders in the year 2013 is to silence the guns by 2020. 2020 is just 4 years away. And unfortunately, we still have some vicious cycle of conflicts in some member states, or in some of our member states. But we are trying hard, night and day, through our African Union Peace and Security Council, through the Executive Council, through the summits of our leaders, like currently the case of South Sudan. Almost every day now, South Sudan is on the agenda, and I'm confident that, God willing, after the summit, our leaders would come up with a roadmap on really how to curb the eruption of violence in South Sudan.
But the theme for this, summit, it's on human rights, but we still see human rights being violated. We still see women and children suffering. We still see a cry for justice, When do we see this stop, really?
I think you have answered your question, that African leaders decided to devote the theme of this year to address human rights on the continent is itself a commitment to ensure that the human rights profile, the human rights situation on the continent improves. We have the human rights strategy for Africa that we have been trying to promote. We are currently working on the transitional justice policy framework to help support the justice mechanism in countries coming out of conflict. And we hope that this summit will adopt a decade of human rights. We believe that just working for 1 year, we cannot really change much. But if we devote an entire decade and focus on the issues of human rights on the continent, we shall have more peace, more stability, and hopefully more development. If you look at almost each and every conflict or crisis, at the bottom line of it, somebody's human rights had been violated, and when they feel that it's not properly addressed, then they take to the machetes, the axes, the knives to fight each other. So that is why the focus on human rights issues is very important.
But what are some of the frameworks? A lot of the time Africans, we've been told we talk a lot, but we hardly do anything, So when are we going to say this is enough? What are some of the frameworks that your office could be putting in place to see that this is actually achieved and it's not just something that we're saying, that will be put in place?
As I told you, we are going to declare a decade of human rights. That means 10 years. 10 years we shall actively pursue human rights on the continent. And it's not just my office at the African Union Commission, but we have a whole organ in Banjul. The African Commission on Human and People's Rights is the oldest organ of the Union. It's now about 35 years old. We have the African Court in Arusha. It's now going to be 10 years old. It's heading for its 10th anniversary.
But has already seen 7 countries only ratify and some already pulling out already.
No, there are more ratifications. I think you are talking about the
declarations, yes.
Because it's the declaration that enables the citizens to have access to the court. We had 8 declarations, but with Rwanda's withdrawal, we now currently have 7, but we'll continue. And it is also actually one of the major activities of the Year of Human Rights, to ensure not only the signing, the ratification, but also the implementation and domestication of these human rights instruments that we have willingly adopted and ascribed to.
Visa-free Africa, is this really possible?
It has already become possible, because we are going to launch the African passport. Rwanda has also made it possible. At least you get a visa on arrival. You can come from anywhere with any African passport. You come to Rwanda, you get a visa on arrival at the airport. The ECOWAS sub-region has done it. The 15 members of ECOWAS for several years now. I come from the ECOWAS sub-region. Moving from one ECOWAS country to another, you don't need a passport. The EAC has made a lot of progress in terms of free movement of persons. And so starting from the countries, the regional economic communities, and now we are going to launch the continental passport. We have captured our ambassadors, we have captured our foreign ministers. We are going to capture our leaders as soon as possible. And the intention is also to give ownership to our member states. The African Union would not continue to issue the African passport to the citizens, but we shall give it back to the member states to issue the African passport to the African citizenry. That is the decision that we are currently working on. We hope it sails through, and that would make it easier, because if you look at the logistics of the African Union having to dish out about 1 billion passports is impossible. So it's something that we are also giving back to the states. Like ECOWAS, I come from Nigeria. I have an ECOWAS passport. It's an ECOWAS passport, but it says on the front that this is Nigeria. On the back, you have the Nigerian emblem. And so it's the same for Sierra Leone, for Ghana, for Cote d'Ivoire, and for Senegal. So this is the dream of the African passport. And we hope, we are not going to force our member states, but any state that is ready can begin it. Now, currently, Ghana has started the 90 days once visa, just like Rwanda. Ghana has launched it. Seychelles has launched it. Mauritius has launched it. So country-wise, regional economic community-wise, the continental integration is on.
A united Africa, is it possible though? As much as we're dreaming, as much as we want it, because there are very many things that partakes for it to be united, yet we still see problems, with the small steps that we're trying to take, we still have problems that hinder this. Do you foresee a united Africa, one Africa, the new Africa that we want?
Well, back in 1963, when our leaders came together to unite and fight colonialism, it was the unity that kept them on. And 50 years on, when we celebrated our Golden Jubilee, we were not discussing fighting colonialism. We are discussing our Agenda 2063. We are discussing other things, but not fighting colonialism. We fought colonialism based on African unity, and I assure you, we shall gain our vision of an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful continent through unity. Unity will continue to keep us together. Every African Union meeting or summit that we have, we take our decision through consensus, and we have been successful at that. We never hardly put any issue to voting. We work on consensus, and that is also a manifestation of African unity.
Let's talk about African leadership that we're talking about. It's very at the core level of any political, or any government, but we still see some leadership or some leaders who hardly bring any good to their people, if not conflicts, or being partaken as part of the people who bring problems to their own countries. What are you doing in your office to ensure that it is not just an Africa of impunity, where people run away with some of these atrocities that they have committed?
Well, thank you very much. let's focus on the positives. We are now in Rwanda, a country that suffered genocide about 20 years ago. Over 1 million lives were lost in a span of 100 days. Now you come to Rwanda, you see a different Rwanda. You see a clean country, you see an organized country, you see a high-tech country, you see a disciplined set of people. And Rwanda is not one of any of those all-rich countries. Rwanda is not known to have diamonds or other important expensive mineral resources, but yet Rwanda invested in its people through great leadership of your current leader. We have many more examples of countries like Rwanda. Yes, we have countries that are facing challenges, issues to do with term limits, issues to do with tenure elongation, issues to do with corruption, and this we shall continue to fight. I believe, I agree with you that leadership is what we want. We want visionary leadership on the continent. We want accountable leadership for our people. We want good governance, and we shall continue to struggle for that.
The new Africa that we are crying for, is it
Yes.
achievable? In your own opinion, Your Excellency?
I wouldn't have been sitting here if I don't believe that the new Africa is not achievable. I'm sitting here, I have dedicated almost all my I have sacrificed my family life. We move around the continent, we sleep on all kinds of beds, we interact with people, the ordinary African citizenry, to ensure that we promote good governance and we improve the quality of lives of all Africans.
A conflict-free Africa? Is it the same sentiments that you have?
Come again?
A conflict-free Africa?
Yes, hopefully by 2020, as I told you.
By 2020.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much for making time to do this.
Thank you.
That was Her Excellency Dr. AISHA ABUDULLAHI, the Commissioner for Political Affairs, who says indeed by 2020 we could just have a conflict-free Africa. Thank you very much for making time to be with us. Continue watching the rest of our programming.